Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. Did you know that our guest today, Taryn Voget, is responsible for birthing our podcast, The Next Chapter with Charlie? This show was all Taryn's idea. After she and I had lunch at a client's cafeteria several years ago, she said something like, "Charlie, you ask such good questions. You should do a podcast." That was 7 years ago, and today we are on show number 317. But that is what Taryn does. She brings the best out of people, and very often that best is about something that feels like a surprising attribute. And so today, executive coach, high-level consultant, and partner in thought, Taryn Voget, will surprise us with fresh ideas about life in a whole new era, one of the 60-second soundbite mentality that is making us all feel rather insane. So I can't wait to discover what's new in the brilliant mind of Taryn Voget. Taryn, it is so good to have you back in studio.
Oh, it is so great to be here. Has it been 7 years? My goodness.
It's been 7. And it was your idea.
I remember it vividly.
Sitting in the SpaceX cafeteria, and you were telling me about one of your first real gypsy journeys.
One of many.
Yes.
And I remember the moment because I had this vision and I saw you on the radio, but I thought radio isn't really what people listen to anymore. Podcasts are becoming hot. And I just had this vision of you in the future being on the radio, which is a podcast. And it's just so fabulous. You've done it. And here we are, 342 episodes?
Soon to be 342. You're 319.
319.
You're 319. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I'm starting to begin to learn how to do this. It takes a couple hundred podcasts to figure out how to do it.
They say it takes at least 100 to just figure out what you're doing, and then the next 100 you start to get good. So you're on 300. Look at you go.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll let the listeners decide. Now, you and I chatted earlier this week about what kind of topics we might discuss today, most of which we will get into. However, I'd like to begin with an unexpected question. As I was reading Belden Lane's brilliant book, The Solace of Fierce Landscapes, which is becoming maybe my all-time favorite nonfiction, he told a story of a Native American man and his wife walking the Sierra Nevadas with their dog. After a bit of conversation with the man, who happened to be a really insightful author, his name is William Least Heat Moon, and he said this of his walking: "A man is never out of work if he gives a damn. It's just sometimes that he doesn't get paid for. A man's work is what he's supposed to do." And then he goes on to say, "A job is what you force yourself to pay attention to for money. With work, you don't have to force yourself." So to me, that means work is what you are willing to do, even if you don't get paid for it. So finally, Taryn, I do have a question after all that. So what are your thoughts on the difference or the integration between a job and work that you're supposed to do?
That might be my favorite question of all time, and I love the tee-up of that story. This is what I do all day, every day, whether I get paid for it or not, and often I call it my sacred service because there'll be someone sitting next to me on an airplane asking me about what should I do with my career? I'm at this crossroads. Or a friend calling me with, I have this idea to start a business. And if I were to say that I had, call it a gift, that I would do for free, which I do, and I also get paid for it, which is great because I get it both ways, it's to really help people feel into that excitement in their soul, that excitement in their heart, to lock into it and then to create from that place. And what I've noticed over 30 years of helping people step into...
You're not old enough to do it for 30 years, Taryn.
I turn 28 every year. You're right. I call it quantum math. It's like that when we opened where it was you and me in the cafeteria at SpaceX, and I just could see what would make you excited. And it was talking to other people, asking good questions, being on a radio, a podcast. There's a way I see it in people. And when you can ask a question and start plucking at that thread inside someone's heart and that excitement, it turns a little flame into a roaring fire. And that quote that you just read is so perfect because that is inside of everybody. I think a lot of us find that we do things for work because we don't know any other way. We don't know how to step into our excitement and get paid. So we do the thing for work, and then maybe we have a side hobby for excitement, or sometimes we're lucky and we get to do both in one. But the truth is, when it is really your genius, it's really your soul's calling, you do it in every context of your life. Take you and asking questions and interviewing people and being curious. You do it here on this podcast, but you've done it for clients for decades. But you do it with friends. You do it with your family. You do it with strangers. It's just like what you're born to do is be curious, ask questions, pull things out of people, learn from them, have that kind of interaction. And that's how genius works. We do it everywhere. Sometimes we get paid.
It just shows your genius in that you used a word that is one of my driving words, and yet it was not mentioned at all, and that is curious. That is what drives everything I do, is curiosity, and that nothing is ever permanent. Everything is subject to change and newness and new value and expansion. And it's just funny you would catch that word. And so I had this question for you that you answered, but I'd like you to drill another level deeper. And that is, I wrote it this way: you have a gift of intuiting people's special giftedness. Tell me about that. How do you do that? Where does that come from? Is that a feeling? Is that an insight? Is it visual? What is that?
Yeah. What is funny is I always say when people are really good at something, it's really hard to explain how you do it because it's something that you've honed over probably, I would say, lifetimes in a sense, but certainly decades. And it's like, for me, it's the way I describe it is I see God inside people. I see how God moves through people, and God in the universal source, like you came from something of creation that's pure love. And everybody is imbued with sort of a signature frequency or a signature energy that is a unique signature, like a thumbprint, And because everybody has something a little different, no two thumbprints are the same, no two people are the same, how things get expressed is very different. It's like how you can have 10 chefs that all have the gift of being a chef, but the expression of it can be very different. That's how souls work. But the way I see it in people, sometimes it just comes to me in a snap, and sometimes it's a little buried inside someone's heart because it's a really vulnerable place to be in your most authentic self. Like the thing that you're born to do can feel very vulnerable because when you put that out, you're opening yourself up to rejection, not just it's something that you do, but something that you are. And so sometimes when I work with people, there's some layers or walls in the heart that have to get softened or opened up or cracked a little bit so that genius and that light can start to come through and come online. Like I said, for me, how do I see it? I see it literally, I don't know, it's like almost like how God moves through somebody, and God not in a religious sense, but for me it's a spiritual sense, and there's a frequency to that and an energy you can pull on that, but it's the energy of excitement. And the minute I can lock into that energy of excitement on someone, the minute I know that's their gift, that's their genius, and that just needs to get stoked a little bit sometimes.
And your genius, because I am intuiting energy and excitement just from the thought of you doing this. You're thinking, oh my God, this is what I'm built to do. You're asking me questions of who I am. So with empaths, and so you are empath, but not in the way that empaths like to consider themselves empaths, but you are an empath of genius energy, of what makes a person excited, and it goes down into the core of who that person is.
It's a great word, empath, because what does empath mean? It means you're feeling something inside somebody else. The benefit of that is I can feel where someone's excited, and that is always the energy of genius, that energy of excitement. They go together. The flip side of that is I also feel their pain, their suffering, their blocks. Like I feel a lot, so sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. But when I can lock into that frequency of excitement, I know that is the essence of someone's soul. That's it.
I didn't know that other side of you. We've never talked about you feeling... But you must, if you can feel the positive energy, then you must be able to feel the troubling energy that someone is feeling. But that doesn't seem to stop you or keep you from proceeding along your lines.
I became a healer many years ago to help people open up into their genius. And to really do that, sometimes you've got to heal a lot of trauma that keeps people locked down or shut down. And in order to heal traumas, you've got to feel into where that trauma is inside people. So it's a skill that I've had to learn, but also to pull out from, because you can get a little bit lost in that energy unless you can keep yourself separate from it. Yeah.
I forgot that you are trained as a shaman, aren't you?
I am.
I forgot all about that, Taryn. And I'm just thinking, shaman, Taryn. I used to tell people I have a shaman. I'm thinking, who is my shaman? It's you. Tell me a bit about this shaman thing. This is very cool.
It's a fun story, and it starts many years ago. I got a gift certificate from a friend to this local spa for $300, which I thought at the time was a crazy generous gift. And I'm looking at the spa menu, and you can get a massage, you can get a facial, but at the very end of the menu, you could get a shamanic soul retrieval and destiny retrieval, and it was $305. And I thought, I can get a massage anytime, but I can't get a destiny retrieval just anywhere. So I booked myself, and who showed up at my session was this guy, Shaman John. And Shaman John, I thought, was going to look like an old wizened shaman with the dreadlocks and the beads and the whole bit. No, Shaman John is a very handsome guy. Yeah. No, Shaman John is clean cut, sandy brown hair, blue eyes, tall, super fit, like a very handsome guy. And he shows up and I'm like, you don't look like a shaman. But anyway, he proceeded in the session to blow my mind wide open. And that's what really set me on this journey. And one day, because we stayed connected, he said, I think you should go to shaman school. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to shaman school. He's no, really, just go check it out. And it's through this organization called the Four Winds Society. They call it like the Harvard of Shaman School. And this guy, Alberto Vialdo, founded it. And I could listen to Alberto read a phone book. This guy has the most lyrical voice. He's the best storyteller you'll ever meet. Anyway, I went to one class and I thought, I'm just going to see what this is. And I thought if I could hone my intuition better, I could help people more. That was really my intention for going, was to work on my own intuition. And I get to shaman school, and the very first day they have you do a healing with somebody where you lay them on the ground and you do this energy medicine. And I call it shaman school. It's actually called healing the light body, which is energy medicine, sort of shamanic energy medicine. And someone, my client, which was a classmate, is laying on the ground, and you put your hands under their head. And I just remember time stopping in this room. And I was like, whoa, I've done this like 10,000 times before. It was the weirdest feeling. And I just never knew that part of me because I was very corporate and I'd had a very corporate career. And yet here I was in shaman school doing a healing, thinking, I know how to do this. It was a very strange feeling. So I go through the rest of the program. It's a 2-year program. You do a lot of your own personal healing. You really learn a lot of crazy techniques and powerful techniques to heal others. And so I came out of that feeling, because you have to do a lot of practice sessions as part of it, feeling confident that I could really help people make a change. But my challenge was I couldn't bring that into a boardroom or a conference room or an office or to a corporate client. It's just too, call it out there.
Yep.
That sort of modality. And so I had to very quickly figure out, how do I take the outcome of this and do it with somebody in a really normal, real setting that doesn't feel weird. And it took me a bunch of years to do that. I had to hone it to what I would call like perfection. And I just recently feel like I got there. And to have just really powerful results with people in just a conversation. But it's really bringing all that energy medicine, all that power, all that intention into helping someone make the changes in their life they're wanting.
No wonder you're so popular, so sought after as a coach. Because I know with me, you've had, we've never had an official relationship, and yet you have been so instrumental in so many things I've done. And now you've got a whole new idea for me as I presented my idea of the podcast for where I want to go. We came up with a new title, a new direction. All it's going to do is cost me $15,000 in rebranding. So, it's going to wait for a little while.
That was a really fun conversation we had about that. And actually, I think your listeners would quite enjoy hearing about it. You ready to talk about what's new for Charlie?
It's not on my notes. But I'm never confined to notes. So go ahead, ask.
You and I were talking when we were prepping for this call, and we were talking about some really deep spiritual concepts that you've been exploring, and I found them quite fascinating. And you and I have had these spiritual talks over the years because I think it's something we both find interesting. But what I've always known about you, Charlie, is that you are someone seeking the truth of God, in a sense. And
always. I
think a lot of us are on that journey with you in our own way. And I think people would love to be on that journey with you on this podcast. And so we were talking about the divine. And tell us. I think your listeners would like to know, what are you reading these days, and what's got you on this journey?
We talked about rebranding the URL from the Next Chapter with Charlie to the Divine Chapter. And it is currently called In Search of Meaning, Adventure, and Awe. And then we're talking about In Search of God in the Everyday. And just that it's not special and wowie and wooey although it is special, wowie and wooey, but it comes through the vehicle of the ordinary, through the everyday. And so I have, since 2020, just before COVID, I began a deep dive in the late medieval Christian mystics, which would be people like Teresa of Avila, Meister Eckhart, John of the Cross, Bonaventure, Julian of Norwich. But I didn't just read their book and then read the next one. I read and I journaled. And each book that I read had a 30 to 50,000 word journal along with it that I would just read. I would read, it's called Lectio Divina. You don't read for information, you read for inspiration. And so you may read 2 or 3 pages, maybe, and then you write on what was the learning of that. And so when I say I took a deep dive into the late medieval Christian mystics, that was it. And it just has, I'm now teaching contemplative prayer, contemplative spirituality, which has to do with inspiration, not information. And it has to do with not knowing about God, but experiencing God. And it's talked about in a language that's ineffable. Words do not, you cannot use words to describe God. They will talk about God. We can get plenty of, and I'm not saying anything wrong about that. Wonderful. I love the biblical text. I love Scripture, but it is not defining God. That is defined. God defines himself or herself for itself, because I call God, not, some people say God is genderless. I say no, God is genderful, is full of all genders and is complete. And so that is where I am. That's where I'm headed. And I love to talk to people that are in search or that are knowledgeable about it or just curious about it. You know, it's fascinating. That's where my life is. And the details could go on and on because it's very complex.
And this is what's interesting about genius is there's always genius. Like, genius is in the simplicity, but simple and easy aren't the same thing, right? You take something complex and you make it simple, but it's not easy. And I think what's fascinating about that is bringing God into the ordinary, because in my experience, in my journey, I found the same thing to be true, that for the longest time I thought God was something way out here that I needed to reach for. And then you go further along on your journey and you realize everything is inside, and inside you and inside this microphone and inside your heart. Like, it's everywhere. This is all the creation. It's the oneness of it all. And what's really fun about this conversation is it actually brings it back to genius. Maybe your listeners don't know, but I founded a company called the Everyday Genius Institute because I see the genius in the everyday, which is, like I said earlier, I see the God in the person and how that works through somebody in the everyday. And I have an idea of an everyday genius because everybody has it. And that's just taking the idea of God and looking at it in a person, but it really is in the everyday, in the ordinary, and the moments that pass by.
I want to tell you a story about this told by my friend Terry Hershey, who's a regular on the show, and he will be on 4 or 5 times a year at least. Terry Hershey is his name, and by the way, Sabbath Moment is blog that is just incredible. And he talks about Moses and the burning bush. And if you remember the story, Moses, is confronted by this burning bush, and he hears a voice of God that says, Moses, take off your sandals, you are on holy ground. Now, the beauty of this, the way Terry explains it, the church has always explained it, especially the conservative church, is that this is a respect thing, to take off your shoes. Your shoes are dirty. You want to be clean before the presence of God. But Terry says, no, that's not it. He says, take off your shoes so you can feel holy ground. You can bury your feet into the dirt, and you can sense, you can feel, you can experience holiness. You're not just looking at it. And that is God in the ordinary. Take off your feet, put them in the dirt. That's God.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's a beautiful story. I agree.
Okay, so enough of that one. Let's go on. I got another thing that you're into that I really, really want to talk to. And so we're going to do a little bit of a thought shift here. And you are here in studio with me in person. Now, as much as I'd like to think that you've missed me and you just wanted to see me, there's a bit more going on in your thoughtful mind. about in person. And in person has to do with time and presence. And it's very important to you nowadays, as I've read in your newsletter and as we've chatted. Talk to me about in person, what that is.
I think this topic has been covered a lot since COVID, where everybody's been working from home and on Zoom and just the challenges and this and that. I feel that after this much time on Zoom, I'm having Zoom burnout, and I don't think I'm the only one, but it's beyond Zoom burnout. I did this thought experiment the other day, or it was actually maybe a week or two ago. And I thought, Taryn, look back over your last year. What stands out in your mind? And there were certainly memories that stood out in my mind. Fun things I did. I went to Thailand with my niece. I had some friends come into town. There were really great things that happened. I had a fabulous client I did some really fun work with last year. So there was these highlight reels. But what was weird is they weren't as many memories as I would normally think I had in a year. Like when I think back when I was younger, I can think of almost more things when I was 28 or 32 than I could when I was 47 last year. And I thought, why do I have fewer memories? And it got me thinking, because I've been on Zoom in my office all day, and we don't make memories when things are not heightened experiences or there's a lot of senses involved, right? Like memories are made when you have multiple senses happening. And when you're on your computer on Zoom, there's just not enough senses activated to create memory, if that makes sense, or like a highlight reel. And I thought, God, as a culture, are we making less memories because we're on our phones too much, we're on Zoom too much, and we're not with people doing things? Or if we are, it's maybe less than what it used to be because we don't go to an office anymore, or we don't go out as much. And I don't know. I'm just exploring this idea for myself, but I want a multisensory life. I want to feel people. I want to be with them. I want to experience life. I want to put my feet in the ground and feel sacred ground. I want that life because the divine is in the everyday, and I want to feel it that way. I'm not feeling it on my laptop right now.
I so concur. And I think, for me, I think it's partly it's my age. I'm 75 almost, not quite, but I'm getting near my 3/4 century mark, which I'm really proud of. I just think there's something very cool about turning 75. My son wants to text, and I don't want to text. I want to talk on the phone. I don't have to talk for a long time. I don't have to have an hour conversation. I can have a 5-minute conversation, but it's hearing his voice and sensing him. And then when we have time to see each other, I saw him at spring training. My son is a baseball player. And I saw him at spring training. And the beauty of spring training was that I would ride with him to work. And so I would ride before I would get to the field before he had to perform. So I had to go off and have breakfast. But we had a 40-minute drive every day from Scottsdale to Goodyear in Arizona. And we'd have a 40-minute drive. That meant I had 40 minutes for 3 or 4 consecutive days with my son. Now, that may not sound like much, but 40 minutes sitting next to each other, and all we talk was philosophy. All we talked just about ideas and new things and what's going on. It was the bitchinest time in the world. It was so cool.
Yeah, and you were in person, you were together, you were in a new place. Again, multiple senses were activated. You were excited, you were having interesting discussion, you could hear him, you could feel him, the air outside. It's all of it that creates an experience that our minds remember. And I guess what I'm wondering, because I see my nieces and nephews just constantly on their phone. Like they came to visit me recently and they were on their phone, and talk about hitting my hot button, man. If you're on your phone ignoring me, that is...
My ego doesn't take that way.
No, anyway, we had some words, but they're addicted, right? It's like trying to break an addiction. And my concern is, here they are in Santa Barbara. I was like, you guys, look up. The ocean is right there. The sand is right beneath your feet. You're on your phones. You're missing this. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care.
I want to continue with this, but before, I think we need to take a quick break. What do you think, Paul? Okay, so we're going to take a break, and then we will be right back. Oh, hi there. This is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and we're having so much fun that I'm forgetting that I'm live. And I am with my special friend, special guest, and brilliant podcast guest, Taryn Voget. And we have been talking about, I'd want to say life, the universe, and everything, but we've covered life, the universe. Now we're going to go to everything. And I want to continue on with what you talked about, your nieces and nephews and the phone addictions, and that you would talk to me about this problematic need in our culture. It's certainly with the Gen Zs and younger and older as well. But I think we live in a world now of things being done quick. We want the quick fix, the hack. How can I make this work? How can I less time I have to spend on it, the better. The wonderful books on smart brevity. I think I'm attracted to those because I think long form can be too long. But we also are living in this, what you called, I liked it, the 60-second world. And there's something that's not working for the 60-second world. And I know it's really important to you, and I want you to educate us on that.
It's such a great topic because it's something that's been really on my channel the last several months. So amongst all the other things I do as a consultant and a coach, I am a content creator. I have a YouTube channel and I've been creating social media content. And I took a very long break from it, but I'm back at it and have been since the beginning of the year. And in a weird way, it's made me more unhappy in my work than I've ever been. Not my coaching work, but when I just think about like my business in general. And so I've been doing this deep inquiry lately of why am I not happy doing what this business is, which is promoting my services, helping people. And it's because, and it was a real epiphany, it's because I'm trying to help people in 60-second moments, which is what social media is. And I don't know for all of your listeners, if you are on YouTube and you want to make a YouTube short, which is basically like a little Instagram story, they have to be 60 seconds or less. And so that's also on Instagram and Facebook and X and all these other platforms, right? The expectation.
And that's what the influencers go by. They
60
do
seconds.
Their gig in 60 seconds.
There's other platforms like Instagram where it's a little bit longer, but I think 90 seconds is the max to have an Instagram reel, which is like kind of the video scrolling you can do. And so you've got to make really catchy content. And if you don't catch someone in the first, not even 5 seconds, 2 seconds, they'll just scroll right off. And so you spend all this time making what you think is good content for 60 seconds or 90 seconds, only to realize that it didn't get promoted. Nobody watched it. You can see the stats on everyone dropped off or clicked through. And I've been finding it really unsatisfying just as a content creator. I'm like, I'm not enjoying trying to help people in 60-second moments. It's just not enough time. Maybe I can provide a minute of inspiration or a teeny tiny nugget, but it's a content hamster wheel that's caused me a lot of just unhappiness. Yeah. It's a lot of unhappiness. And then you see all these promotions on like Instagram that's you can make a year of content in 6 minutes with our new AI tool. No, you can't. You just cannot. It's not going to be any good content. It's going to be garbage, which is, in my experience, most of what AI will spit out for you.
Except for mine.
Do you use AI? Oh, yeah, you had a good AI tool. We should talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've just been thinking, do I enjoy this? Do I enjoy making content in 60-second sound bites? The answer is no, I don't. I enjoy longer form. I enjoy my YouTube videos. I enjoy my newsletter that I get to make. LinkedIn to a degree because it's a little bit longer form. And I thought, you know what, Taryn, if I'm taking my own consulting or coaching advice, do what you love. Do what brings you energy. Focus there and forget about all that. And of course, everyone's going to say, oh, but you have to be online if you've got a presence. You got to have your own brand and this and that. I don't care. I don't like it. So I'm not going to do it. Like, it's really like a line in the sand for me of, unless I had a lot of marketing support to help me, I'm just not going to. It drains me. And so then I thought, okay, that's as a content creator, but now as a content consumer, how do I feel after I'm watching 60-second bites? And here's what's interesting is that most of us have a very busy day. We're doing all different things. And so we go to our phones and our social media to try to escape the busyness and zone out. But what do we zone out to? We zone out to 60-second moments, which are very busy. They're loud, they're quick, they're fast, there's quick edits, fast cuts, quick hooks. And so even though we're trying to zone out for our busy world, we land into busy land, but we mindlessly scroll through this only to feel that we didn't actually get the rest we were looking for.
Yeah.
And so life is moving really fast, and to zone out, we go to a place where it's moving even faster. So it's a bit of for me, a reflection of, is this what I really want to be doing? Is this the content I want to be consuming? Is this where I want to be zoning out? And can I make my life move a little slower? Because that is what energizes us, I think, sometimes is slowing down. But when you're revved up, sometimes it's hard to slow back down. And this is why a lot of us are overweight, because it's cortisol that causes weight gain, right? It's that stress. There's a lot of health issues around it. Like we know what all the problems are, but are we doing anything about it? And again, I'm on my own journey. I'm not sitting here being like, everyone should do this. I'm not saying that. It's just reflecting on, what do I want for my life?
Yeah, a couple of things are coming to mind. One is on the 60-second thing, and I do want to talk about what you're calling long form, but also that you're practicing what you preach, and that is coming from who you are, not of what is expected. What does the culture want? What does the society want? I know on my show, I am much less interested in gathering numbers than providing impact and influence and creative ideas and thinking new and thinking different. And that's what drives me. And the people that are interested in that are going to follow that. And if I promote it, I'm sure more people would do it. But I do zero promotion. I come from the world of when I was an executive coach, I did zero marketing. My wife is an executive coach and trainer, does zero marketing. And she makes like she had a company of 3 people. She does so well. It's stupid, but it's just letting your content be your advertising, be your marketing. But so you're coming from, you're practicing what you preach. But I also want to, I just want to be real clear on, you're saying long form. Now, long form, there's a history of long form, which is several pages. So long form is long form. You're not really talking about that kind of long form. You're just talking about paragraphs or a couple of pages or so that you can explain it. That has become long form in today's vernacular.
That's exactly right. The relativity has changed. What used to be long form as an hour is now an 8-minute YouTube video. That is now long form. My YouTube videos are 8 minutes, 15 minutes. To me, that's long form in today's day and age.
That is long form, yeah. Yeah, and my shows, Paul is always rolling his eyes because my shows are 45 minutes. And at least I'm not at where, look at Joe. Joe Rogan does 3 hours, and he doesn't seem to have trouble getting people to follow him because he's got 3 good hours of, I don't know, I've never listened to more than one. So I assume the other 2 are good. But that's all I can handle. I wanted to ask you a question that has just eluded me. I'll just go on to my next question. I want to go now in the show almost back to where we began. So we're doing a circular thought pattern here. And you talk about creating a life you want. And this is creating it according to who you are. And the big thing this is something we discussed earlier in the week. And you talked about a sense of fulfillment. That is what's really important. And tell me, how do you even go about that task of, I think a lot of people couldn't really articulate what fulfillment is like, what that means, what it would be, what would fulfillment be apart from being busy?
It's a great question, and I think it also is this idea that fulfillment is the same thing over time. Fulfillment is a moment, or it's a phase, it's a period. What is fulfilling? And it's an inquiry and a reflection on a regular basis, because what used to be fulfilling a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago isn't the same thing as it is today. When I was in my 20s, I was a certified workaholic, and I found a lot of, call it fulfillment in work and working these just crazy hours. And then I realized later that workaholism is a form of addiction, and I had to go through that journey on my own. And it's interesting because now when I see people promoting, oh, it's a hustle culture, you got to work harder, you got to work harder than everybody else and this and that, I just think, y'all are some workaholics. For me, in this phase of my life, what's fulfilling is having balance. And I find fulfillment in doing my absolute best at something, whether it's being a friend, helping a client, being a sister, whatever that thing is. How can I do that the best and be of greatest service to anyone who's in front of me, and do it from a place of joy and happiness and service? And I find that fulfilling. If I played pickleball all day, that wouldn't be fulfilling. If I worked all day, that wouldn't be fulfilling. For me, it's balance. But that's where I'm at on my journey. It's a matter, I think, of everybody saying, what would be fulfilling? And then how do I make the changes in my life that would get me more in alignment with that? And I think a lot of people feel like they don't have power in their life. Oh, I work too much. I can't quit my job. I got to support my kids. There's all the reasons why. And yet what I will say is we all have the power to architect any kind of life we want. Sometimes It may take a little time, but we all have that power.
I think we need to work hard at understanding who that person is. I'm a big fan of Richard Rohr. And Richard Rohr wrote probably his most famous book, most purchase book is Falling Upward, and it's about two halves of life, first half, second half. And the first half is about being productive. It's about building the ego, and it's about building, and in a good way, it's about building identity and competence and knowing who you are. But the second half comes to a realization that all of that I've been doing is important, is a foundation for who I am, but it no longer matters. All of this stuff that I did no longer matters. There is something else. And so I've had to think of what my role, and I've studied some archetypes and worked on archetype. I believe at 3/4 of a century, my role is to be an elder. And an elder is a lost vocation in our society. We don't, you are elderly, but you were never an elder in the old days of sitting in the gateways and giving wisdom and advice. And I have three things that I do as an elder. I inspire, I influence, and I offer to the best of my ability tidbits of wisdom. And so if it doesn't fit into those three things, I'm not doing it. That's not my role as an elder. And so how am I fulfilled? When I make an impact, when I influence somebody, when I inspire somebody, when I can give them some ideas or some wisdom they haven't thought of. I'm done. I've lived a fulfilled life.
That might be the most beautiful way I've ever heard anyone say that. I think that, there's so many layers to unpack there, but yeah, but yes, because that idea of an elder, in a way, I never really had grandparents. I don't know about you, but they just weren't really around. They died when I was young, so I didn't really have that. And there's this longing for wisdom, someone to hold you by the hand and guide you along your journey. My dad was actually probably the best at that. And yet, what do we do with our elders? We put them away in old folks' home and forget about them. But there's so much wisdom there. And what's wisdom? It's learned experience. You only
but
get there.
Also, I would say it's not just the kids, the youth, or the adults that put them there. They have not assumed that position. They've not they've not spent a life trying to give wisdom. They spent a life in America, it's telling people what to do. It's a very childhood sort of the parental, we tell you what to do, rather than just before my son turned 16, I quit being parent. I said, my job is no longer to be the parent. My job is to be consultant. That is my job with my son. But it's a parental consultant. It wasn't like he had unlimited freedom, but he had a lot of freedom. He had a lot of freedom, and we would talk about things. So wisdom began with me and my son, when he was 16, and since I was 42 when he was born, I was 58 years old. So that is a lot older than a lot of people with a 16-year-old child. But it begins with the elder herself or himself in contributing wisdom.
What I love what you said there was this idea of assuming the role of an elder. Chip Connolly is one of the more interesting characters on the scene because he was the founder of Joie de Vivre Hotel and kind of chief, I don't know what his official title was, but strategy officer at Airbnb. He's a very successful kind of hotelier. Right. And he recently founded, I say recently, I think it's been 5 or 6 years now, I think it's called the Modern Elder Academy.
Oh.
And it's his take, too, that there's this idea of middle-aged wisdom and middle-aged elders, and to help people step into that role, and to find themselves, realize their wisdom, step into their own wisdom, share it out. And it's a really beautiful cultural idea that I would love to see more of, because there is so much there that we're not tapping into.
That is... I love that. I'm going to have to look into that. Mm-hmm. I love that. Taryn, you and I could go on and we will go on because we're having dinner after this. So we will go on for hours. But I do have a final question that you've already talked a bit about, but I would like to close with this idea. See, we both are very into divinity. I'm first to admit that my mother tongue is Christianity. And so I will speak in that language. I can speak another language, but not as fluently as you. You're more multilingual than I am. So tell me, how does a person going about feeling divinity in their life, sensing the presence of the holy, the source, the universe?
God, talk about ending on a deep question. I can speak for myself, and maybe there's, talking about wisdom, maybe there's some wisdom here for someone listening, which is, I think my journey has been to feel that more myself, and to feel not just God or divinity out there or in the ordinary, but to feel it in my own heart. Like, where does that divinity reside inside? How can I tap into what's inside of me, knowing that is the quote unquote, the heart of divinity? And so I think so much of the journey is, it's not about letting love in, it's about letting love out. And I think we feel divinity most often when we let the love out. And we can let the love out in so many ways. And the funny paradox is, when you let the love out, you open something up to then, in that infinity loop, allow it to come back in. And so I think for anyone on the journey of, how do I feel more divinity? How do you let more of your own love out in any which way? Through kindness, through acts of service, through petting a cat, through putting your feet in the sand. How do you let the love out in those moments?
That is beautiful. Letting the love out provides space, because you're releasing something, and there is something that we hate a vacuum. We've got to have something to fill that space. And what fills that space is more love. Mm-hmm. But we have to let that out in order to experience more love. Taryn, you're brilliant. I love chatting with you. Taryn Voget, thank you so much for spending time with me today and coming in person. That means a ton.
And thank you for being a memory that you made for me this year, Charlie. I love being on your show. Thank you again for having me.
I have on the links, I have your website, and I have an Instagram access to your newsletter, so people can subscribe to your newsletter. Anything else you want me to put on that?
Yeah, my YouTube channel is great. You can Google me or YouTube me at Taryn Voget. There's some new content coming out every week, a lot of stuff around finding your purpose and finding your passion, and things around genius that I've been talking about. So you can find me on YouTube, which is where my long form 8 to 15-minute content is.
Okay, we'll make sure we'll get it tonight, and I'll make sure I have a link so they can get to that as well. Okay, I want to thank Taryn, and I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.